Hello, I'm Elspeth Jackson, the author of Rag Rugs, Pillows and More. And today's rag rug tutorial video is going to be on short, shaggy rag rugging. For anyone who has seen one of my tutorials before, you'll probably be familiar with two of the traditional British techniques of rag rugging. So the first one here is called loopy rag rugging, which creates a much flatter, slightly more detailed effect. And the more traditional style of rag rugging is called shaggy rag rugging. What I'll be teaching you today though is a kind of combination between the two. So in this little sampler that you see in front of you, there are the three main techniques of rag rugging all demoed here. So around the outside in the white and black material is traditional shaggy rag rugging. Then the next layer is what I'm going to be teaching today, which is called short shaggy rag rugging. And then the centre has been done in loopy. So the thing I love about this technique that we're going to be learning is that it's a little bit shorter. So when you're doing designs, they actually stay much more kind of defined in this technique. So as with all of the rag rugging techniques, the first step is always to prepare your fabric. So I like to do this by folding my bit of fabric, generally lengthways. And I fold it until I've got a nice little tube like so. And then I cut my strips by cutting through lots of layers at the same time with a pair of really, really sharp rag rug scissors. Generally, I then cut them to the right length for doing shaggy rag rugging. So the pieces that you want are roughly about 7 centimetres in length. And we do exactly the same process for this short shaggy technique we're learning today. So I've got here 4 strips, 5 actually. There was a little bit of a straggler there. So I've got 5 strips. You can see they're all different lengths, it doesn't matter. We're going to grab our rag rug gauge, which is an absolutely brilliant tool for saving time and effort when cutting your strips up. You can actually see another video that I've made which gives a few tips on how you best use this. But what we're doing is we're basically wrapping our strips along and around the gauge. And you don't have to be very accurate with this. It's actually very, very forgiving, which is nice. We like crafts that aren't very accurate. And you keep going until you're nicely secured into the wooden block. You then cut down the groove at the top, and all of the pieces that you get are all roughly the same length, which is, as I said, about 7 centimetres. These are the kind of length of strip that you would use for doing this traditional shaggy style of rag rugging here. So to create that shorter pile, to do the short shaggy technique, we take our hessian, and you're best using hemmed hessian so it doesn't fall apart as you do this. But we get our short strip, rather than rag rugging it full length, we fold it in half lengthways. We weave our spring tool into the hessian, and you generally want to capture 2 strands onto the spring tool barrel, and you want to push enough of it through so that those kind of strands are past the opening part of the spring tool. You then grab the corner of the folded part of the strip, and it's important to grab the folded corner rather than the middle of the strip, because if you grab the middle, it tries to pull too much of it through at once. You then give it a pull and a bit of a wiggle until you have got your first piece of short shaggy rag rugging, which has a loop on one side and then 2 cut edges on the other side. And that is all there is to it. The tightness of the hessian, so the fact that you're using the correct weave, means that as you continue on, it will begin to tighten up, which will make things nice and secure. But to continue this method, you generally count a couple of strands in the hessian. You then insert your spring tool, and you keep it closed when you do this, and you poke on through, fold your strip in half, grab the corner again, and just pull through. and you rinse and repeat. So miss a couple of strands, push on through, grab your next strip, fold the corner and grab on. And there are only a couple of things that you can really do wrong in this technique. The first one, which is quite a common one, which I've noticed on my workshops, is that people accidentally open their spring tool as they go through the hessian rather than keeping it closed. If you keep the spring tool open as you go, it actually ends up snapping the hessian sometimes. So you want to make sure that when you first poke through that it's closed. We don't want any mishaps. The second thing that people can do wrong, I promise you there's not many, is just the fact that people begin to miss out a few too many holes between one of the strips and the next. If you begin to miss out too many holes in the hessian, that's when you begin to get a bald rug. And that is the last thing we want if we're going to put all of this effort into making a nice shaggy, short shaggy rag rug. But those are pretty much the only things you can do wrong. When you're spacing the short shaggy rag rugging, you just need to watch out for the thickness of the fabric. So because each of these pieces is doubled over, if you're using a thick fabric like a fleece, when you're first cutting your strips, you need to cut them a little bit narrower than you would normally, just because otherwise you're going to really struggle to pull them through the hessian. So the average width of strip that we generally cut is about 1.5 centimeters. However, if you were using a thick fabric, as I said, like a fleece or a denim, you would cut your strips under 1 centimeter in width, because otherwise you're going to struggle to get them through the hessian. And my next little tip would just be, if you're struggling to get any of the pieces through the hessian, just give them a little bit of a wiggle as you go through, and it just helps to ease them through. But you can see here a project that I've done in a combination of the loopy technique and the short shaggy technique. And it really just helps to keep a very similar height level. So if I'd done this in the shaggy technique, it would have kind of fallen all over the place and looked a little bit messy. So it's a technique I really love. Thank you, Mum, for inventing it. And I hope you all enjoy using this new technique as much as I've enjoyed it.